The power of not reacting. The silent warrior. In a quiet, humble village in northern England, there lived a boy named Elliot. He was 17, the son of a shepherd, and known for his calm demeanor. Unlike others his age, Elliot never raised his voice, never punched a wall, and never spoke without thinking. Some mistook his quietness for weakness. Others whispered that he was odd. He spent most of his days tending to his father's sheep, reading old books, and walking along the riverbanks. His closest friend was a girl named Claire, a baker's daughter, who admired his peaceful soul. One day, she'd often say, "Your silence will be louder than any shout." Elliot's father, Thomas, was a wise man, often saying, "Son, when someone throws fire at you, don't throw fire back. Pour water on it." Elliot took those words to heart. But life in the village was not always peaceful. Jacob, the blacksmith's son, was a hot-headed brute who took pleasure in mocking Elliot. He'd shove him in the streets, insult his clothes, even call him names like "mute mouse" or "coward boy." Elliot never reacted. He simply smiled or walked away. People often asked, "Why don't you fight back?" Elliot would say, "Because I'd rather be in control of myself than try to control others." One autumn evening, Jacob went too far. He ruined Elliot's father's old family book, his most cherished possession, by tearing its pages in front of the village crowd. Still, Elliot said nothing. He looked Jacob in the eye and walked away. That moment was the beginning of something much bigger than anyone could have imagined. The next morning, Elliot sat quietly on the hill above the village, his father's torn book in his lap. Claire came and sat beside him. "You can't let him keep doing this," she said. "It's not weakness, Claire," he replied. "It's harder to stay calm than to fight." She sighed. "One day, you'll explode." Elliot smiled. "Only if I let the fire in." But Jacob wasn't done. He grew bolder. He spread rumors, accused Elliot of stealing from the village store, and even tried to have him punished. The village elder, Old Man Barrow, knew Elliot's nature and didn't believe a word. But the damage to Elliot's reputation had begun. At night, Elliot's father spoke to him. "Son, patience isn't about doing nothing. It's about choosing the right moment." Then he gave Elliot a small, leather-bound notebook. "This was my father's journal. He wrote every time he could have reacted, but didn't. He learned from it. Maybe you should too." Elliot began writing. Every insult, every injustice, every pain. But no retaliation. Winter came. The village was covered in white, but tension was rising. Jacob had joined a group of rowdy young men who called themselves the Wolves. They bullied, they threatened, and they were feared. Elliot remained untouched, not because they didn't try, but because he refused to respond. Even when pushed in the snow, even when they stole his bread. One night, the wolves set fire to Thomas's barn. Flames rose, and sheep cried in panic. Elliot and his father rushed in, saving what they could. The next morning, Jacob was seen smirking. The village was divided. Some admired Elliot's restraint. Others whispered, "Maybe he really is weak." Claire was furious. "Why do you let them do this?" Elliot looked at the ashes. "Because if I become them, then I've already lost." A storm came, not of snow, but of consequence. Jacob and the wolves had gone too far. They attacked a traveling merchant's cart outside the village, stealing goods and hurting the man. The merchant was connected to the king's court. Soldiers arrived. An investigation began. Jacob panicked. He accused Elliot. He planned it all. He led us. The soldiers were ready to arrest Elliot. But then something changed. Old Man Barrow stepped forward with evidence. Jacob's handwriting on stolen scrolls, seen by villagers. Claire brought Elliot's journal to the soldiers, every word, every emotion, every restraint documented. Even the merchant, recovering at the village inn, said, "That quiet boy? He carried me to safety after the others ran." The truth broke through the lies. Jacob and the wolves were arrested. Elliot was cleared. The king's men were so impressed with his calm, wise manner that they offered him a place in the city to study under a royal advisor. Elliot declined. "This is my home. I want to help it grow." The villagers began to see him differently, not as a boy who was silent, but as a man of principle. His father's words now echoed in the streets. "Pour water, not fire." Jacob, before being taken away, asked Elliot, "Why didn't you ever fight me?" Elliot replied, "Because I didn't want to become like you." That struck deeper than any punch. Years passed. Elliot grew into a respected leader. People came from nearby towns to learn from him. His philosophy was simple. You don't always have to react. Sometimes, silence is the loudest roar. Claire became his wife. Together, they built a school where children learned not just math and language, but emotional strength and moral courage. The village that once laughed at Elliot now built statues of him. Not as a warrior with a sword, but a thinker with a pen and a calm face. One day, a little boy asked him, "Sir, what do you do when someone makes you angry?" Elliot knelt and said, "I listen to my heart. If it says, hurt them back, I wait. Because after the storm passes, the right answer always comes." In his older years, Elliot faced one last challenge. A political man from the city wanted to control the village's resources. He came with bribes, then threats, then an army. People turned to Elliot. "Will you lead us to war?" He shook his head. "Not war. We'll speak truth." They held a council. The city man insulted Elliot, mocked his robes, and called him an old fool. Elliot remained silent until the man finished. Then Elliot stood. He revealed a document, the king's decree from years ago that granted the village full protection and sovereignty. The man paled. "You spoke like a tyrant," Elliot said, "but I kept my peace. And now, the truth speaks for me." The army left. The village cheered. Elliot died peacefully at the age of 83. His funeral was attended by thousands. On his tombstone, they engraved his words, "To react is human. To choose your reaction is strength." His story became legend. In schools across the kingdom, his journal was read aloud. In households, his lessons were passed from parent to child. And every time someone was tempted to lash out, they'd remember the silent warrior of the North, who won every battle without ever raising his voice. With Jacob gone, peace returned to the village, but Elliot found himself under a new kind of pressure. People came to him with every problem. "My son won't listen to me. Our fence borders the next farm. Should we move it? Is it wrong to hate my neighbor?" He never turned anyone away. He would listen patiently, never rushing to speak. Sometimes he didn't even answer, he simply asked a question in return. And in those questions, people found their own answers. But Elliot was still human. He too had moments when rage simmered inside. Like the time a young boy named Benji was caught stealing bread from Claire's bakery. Claire was kind, She didn't call it out, but Elliot saw something in Benji. Fear and hunger mixed with pride. He sat Benji down. "Why steal when you could have asked? I thought you'd say no." "I've never said no to an honest need," Elliot replied. Benji's lip quivered. Elliot handed him a loaf. "Take it, and help Claire tomorrow in the bakery to earn it. That's the only way it tastes good." Benji nodded. Months passed. Spring arrived. Flowers blossomed, sheep roamed freely again, and a quiet contentment fell over the village. One morning, while walking along the riverbanks, Elliot heard a voice, soft, humming. A girl in torn robes was sitting by the water, washing her feet. She looked no older than 16. "You're not from here," Elliot said gently. She startled, then nodded. "I'm from the east. I ran away." "From what?" "My uncle. He beat me. I refused to marry the man he chose. So I ran. Been walking for 2 days." Elliot extended his hand. "You're safe here." They called her Ronnie. She was shy, observant, and quiet, much like Elliot once was. Claire took her in. The villagers were hesitant, but Elliot's word was enough. And slowly, Ronnie flourished. She read, worked in the fields, and learned to write. One day, a villager muttered, "Foreign mouths eat native bread." Ronnie heard it. She said nothing, but Elliot saw her face fall. Later, he said, "You don't have to prove yourself. Let your actions do that." Ronnie smiled. "Like you?" "Exactly." Peace, however, is never permanent. A new man arrived in the village, Lord Cedric, a city-born tax collector sent by the king. His robes were fine, his tongue silver, but his eyes always calculated. He smiled too much and listened too little. At first, he simply took account of land and livestock. Then he started questioning Elliot's authority. "You were never elected, you're just liked." Elliot replied, "Respect isn't always voted on. Sometimes it's earned slowly." Cedric sneered, "That's dangerous." Rumors began that Elliot controlled the village like a tyrant, that he profited from silence, that Ronnie was his informant. One day, Cedric openly challenged Elliot at the town gathering. "This boy has never been trained in law or war. Why do you trust him?" Old Man Barrow stood up. "Because he saved this village from war without lifting a sword. Can you say the same?" But Cedric wasn't finished. Cedric arranged a public inspection. He brought city guards to search homes and demanded that Elliot step down. The villagers panicked. Claire begged Elliot to confront Cedric. Ronnie offered to speak for him. Elliot said, "No, I will speak, but not now." Instead, he called for a village council under the ancient tree. When everyone gathered, Cedric strode forward. "This man is not your leader. He is your illusion." Elliot raised his hand. "You speak of law, Lord Cedric. But tell me, what law gives you the right to plant division in a peaceful home?" Cedric laughed. "You think your words can stand against my orders? I think truth doesn't need shouting. It needs standing." He then handed Cedric a sealed letter, written years ago, by the king's own hand, declaring Elliot as the village protector. Cedric turned pale. The crowd murmured. Claire stepped forward. "You rule with fear. He leads with love. That is why we follow him." Cedric left that night, furious and humiliated. But vengeance simmers quietly. A week later, Elliot woke to screams. Ronnie's house was on fire. Flames licked the night sky. The villagers rushed to help, but it was too late. She survived, barely. Someone had thrown a torch through her window. The village wept, but Elliot was still. He visited her, holding her hand as she lay bandaged. "You won't say anything?" Claire asked, furious. "I said everything I needed to. The world is watching. If we react now, they'll say we deserved it. But she could have died. She didn't, and she won't be the last they try to silence." He wrote a letter, not of anger, but evidence, logic, facts, and sent it to the king's court. 3 weeks later, Cedric was recalled. The fire didn't break Elliot. It sharpened him. Word of Elliot's quiet victory spread across neighboring towns. Letters came, requests for mediation, for advice, for teachings. He published a short book titled Still Waters: Lessons in Restraint, a simple collection of his journal entries and philosophies. Young people came to study. Some called it the way of the silent mind. Benji, now older, became a teacher. Ronnie recovered and began speaking publicly about her journey. Claire managed the school and bakery, now joined into one space, nourishing minds and bellies. Still, Elliot remained the same, humble, quiet, always listening first. One morning, a royal messenger arrived on horseback. "Sir Elliot of the North, His Majesty invites you to serve on the Council of Peace." The villagers cheered, but Elliot paused. He called a village meeting. "If I leave, will this village still hold to patience? Will it still forgive before fighting?" Old Man Barrow spoke. "You taught us not just with words, but by enduring pain with grace. We will honor that." Elliot left the next morning for the capital, not to gain power, but to sow the seeds of peace. The end. If you enjoyed the video, please like, share and subscribe.